Hi guys, hope all of us are doing great. My name is Ernest and this is Ernest Sciences and the Mathematics TV channel. Today we are going to look at the concept of the stomach and some of the physiological processes which are going to take place inside the stomach during the concept of digestion. Now I'm going to use a series of pictorial illustrations which of course I am going to put a disclaimer that I do not own the rights to this specific image, and I like to direct our members to the Pearson Education which of course is going to consist of materials which are quite relevant for us, and of course they're going to be very much informative, especially on the concept of their literature on the human anatomy. Therefore I'm going to use these illustrations for education and perhaps educational purposes, and of course for illustration purposes in that specific respect. Now in this case we're going to look at the initial stages we had discussed on the concept of swallowing, which basically constituted three processes of the Barco phase, the pharynx, the pharyngeal phase, and the esophageal phase in that specific respect. Now we said from this specific section of the oral cavity, food is going to be mechanically broken down into sizes which can be digested by the body, and of course there's going to be some of the accessory organs like the salivary glands which are going to of course bring saliva into the mouth, and it's mixed with food, of course, and this specific mixture is going to be containing some of the digestive enzymes like amylase, which are going to be passed down into the pharynx through this specific posterior section. So in this case, we're going to see that some of the general plan of this specific oral cavity and the adjacent organs are going to facilitate the smooth movement of food from the oral cavity into the stomach through the pharynx and the esophageal. So in this, or the esophagus. So in this case, this specific section, the uvula is going to prevent food from passing into the oral cavity. Of course, passing into the nasal cavity at this specific point. And of course, we're going to see that this is going to be a section that is going to separate this oral cavity from the of course the nasal cavity at this specific point. Now this particular section of the pharynx, there's a section referred to as the epiglottis, and this is going to of course move posteriorly in order to ensure that the food that is being swallowed does not enter into the gas or the airway at this specific point, which is the larynx. And of course it's going to ensure that it moves smoothly into the esophagus, and the general makeup of the esophagus, as we said, they are going to constitute the longitudinal muscles which are going to contract in order to ensure that food moves through the process of peristalsis into the stomach at this specific point. Now my next illustration is going to show the general makeup of the stomach, and that is going to assist us appreciate the overall functions which it's going to play in order to facilitate the whole concept of digestion in humans. Now, the human stomach is basically a muscular sac that is found just below the diaphragm. And of course, we can see at this specific point that this is the general makeup of the stomach that is located to this adjacent organs just below the diaphragm, given as such. Now, there are various ranges of muscles which are going to, or sheet of muscles which are going to be surrounding this specific stomach. And this, of course, are going to be keeping it in place to ensure that there's prevention of tangling and other kind of unnecessary, of course, orientation which are going to occur in this particular place. And they overall work in order to ensure that the stomach is kept in place. Now we're going to see the particular sections of this specific omentum which are located at this upper and the lower section of this particular stomach. And of course, as we have said, the stomach basically is one of the digestive organs which we are going to see play a number of roles to ensure that the subsequent and the initial processes of digestion are successful. Now, there are three basic functions which we are going to witness being done by the stomach, and this, of course, entails the concept of a physical digestion by churning the food. Now we're going to look at the cross-section of the stomach and the various range of muscles which are contained therein. And of course, they are going to assist in ensuring that during contraction and the relaxation, the food is being churned and of course turned into a mixture which is going to be, of course, appropriate for the other subsequent processes of digestion. Now also we're going to see that there is going to be a process of chemical digestion taking place in the stomach, and there are other chemical which we are going to see, like the hydrochloric acid, which is going to be released into the stomach, of course, compartment, in order to ensure that the food substances which are therein are going to be broken down or converted into appropriate substances which can be absorbed by the body. And then lastly, we're going to see that there's going to be a limited range of absorption which is going to be, of course, taking place inside the stomach. And this includes the absorption of some of the drug substances, alcohol, and some of the water which has been taken in form of food. So in this particular case, there is going to be a range of course, activities which are going to take place. And in my subsequent display, I'm going to show the overall plan of the stomach, or the physical makeup of the stomach, especially on the concept of the various muscles which I've mentioned, which are going to be, of course, involved in the concept of churning and other aspects which I've mentioned, especially on the physical aspect of digestion. So the next illustration entails a cross section of the stomach, and this is going to constitute the pyloric part and the muscular layer, which we are going to see at this specific point. Now, the junction between the stomach and the esophagus, there's going to be a constriction at this specific point, which is, of course, going to allow the food move into the stomach. And this is going to be, of course, be elaborated on another display that I'm going to show, but it's referred to as the cardioesophageal sphincter, which is a muscle constriction found at this specific point. Now, its major function is to prevent regurgitation or the movement of the already churned food back into the esophagus, and this of course acts to prevent the erosion of this specific muscle lining, which or rather the lining of the esophagus, which we're going to see later, which is thin and delicate. So in this case, of course, we had said that some of the components which are going to be of course found in this stomach include the acids like HCl, or hydrochloric acid, which are corrosive in nature, and therefore one of the functions of this opening sphincter into the stomach is going to allow for prevention or preventing regurgitation of the food in form of chyme into the esophagus in that specific order. So we can divide perhaps the stomach into 4 specific regions, depending on these particular parts which I've mentioned in this case. Now, this specific cross section is showing a range of muscles which constitute longitudinal layers of muscles, the circular layers of muscles, and oblique layers of muscles given in this specific case. Now, these are the muscle lining which are going to, of course, be constituting this specific section of the great curvature and the lesser curvature in that particular part. And this is going to constitute the body of the stomach given in this specific order. Now, just similarly to the opening part, this specific part, upper part which I mentioned, that consists of the cardioesophageal sphincter, this specific lower section that is going to also have a muscle constriction refers to as the pyloric sphincter. Now, the pyloric part constitutes the pyloric antrum, the pyloric canal, and pyloric orifice at this specific point. And in a sense, they are going to play a role in ensuring that basically the food which is maintained within this stomach is of course kept in order to ensure that there is an appropriate action which has been maybe taken or undertaken, or a reflex action to ensure that the food which has been appropriately, of course, churned and made in form of chyme in the stomach is released. So basically, the 2 constrictions are to ensure that the food is maintained inside the stomach or released at the appropriate time. So at this specific point of the pyloric antrum, we're going to see that there are folds which are referred to as or the muscular lining of the stomach, which are formed in terms of folds. They are referred to as rugae, and they are going to contain some of the finer sections of the stomach, which we are going to see later. And one of the major functions of these folds is to increase the surface area for digestion, as we are going to see within this specific area. They are going to consist of some of the glands, which we are going to see in finer details, referred to as the gastric pits. Now, these gastric pits are going to be, of course, numerous in number, and they're going to consist of some of the glands which are going to secrete mucus to protect the muscle or the lining of the stomach from corrosion and other activities of substances like the acid, which we had mentioned in this particular case. And also, we're going to see that there are some various digestive enzymes which are going to be released from these gastric pits, and I'm going to show them in a finer details in perhaps another illustration which is going to show a finer magnification of this specific surface that I've referred to as the rugae. So in my next display, I'm going to show this specific section, and of course it's going to assist us appreciate basically the overall concept of the stomach in finer details. Now, in this specific section of the stomach, basically is showing the cross section of the various muscle layers which are mentioned, and some of the gastric pits which are found on the surface are mentioned. Now, these specific layers are going to be, or rather, aligned according to the muscles which we had discussed for longitudinal layer. At this specific point, the exterior part, of course, we're going to see that it's almost adjacent to the serosa, which is the outermost layer. And then we're going to see that the longitudinal muscles are going to be forming this specific part. And of course, we're going to have the circular layer, which is going to constitute of the mesenteric plexus at this specific point, which basically is a range of this specific layer, which I'm encircling. And then we're going to have the oblique layer, which is going to be a muscular layer at this specific point, consisting of these particular cells, which I'm showing this specific point. Of course, we're going to see the nature or the major plan of the muscular smooth muscles, or the smooth muscles in an exclusive video, and that's going to assist us on how these specific smooth muscles act in order to ensure this process of contraction. Now we're going also to see that this specific point we have the submucosa, which is going to be adjacent to the muscularis mucosae at this particular point. Now this specific section is essential in a sense that it's going to consist of arteries and veins, which are going to provide nourishment at this specific point, or take the food materials absorbed from the stomach into the, of course, the blood circulatory system and the lymphatic system, which are mentioned later. Now, in this case, of course, as I've shown, this one in green consists of the lymphatic vessel, which is also going to provide for coordination of course, exchange of materials between this specific section of the stomach and this particular section of the submucosa and the muscular layer located at this particular point. Now, the upper part adjacent to this specific gastric pits, we have, of course, the mucosa, which basically constitute the simple columnar epithelium and the lamina propria, and this specific lower section. Now I'm going to show the particular details of these specific gastric pits, which are mentioned in my previous video, which is going to assist us, of course, appreciate this specific aspect of depressions which are on the muscle, or rather the stomach lining, which are going to be taking part in the final aspect of the human digestion. Now, basically, this is going to constitute the cells of the gastric glands, which, of course, are going to be the services of this specific section that we had called rugae. So in this case, this is a final detailed picture of this specific aspect of the gastric gland. And of course, it's going to constitute of, as I said, mucosa cells, which are mucosa epithelial cells located at this specific point. Now, these ones are white in color, shown by this specific point, and adjacent to these ones are the lamina propria, given as such. And then next, we're going to see that the mucosa cells are going to play a role in, of course, secretion of mucus, which, as we said, is going to play a vital role in protecting the stomach lining against collision of other substances which are going to be contained in the stomach, like the acids. And then we are going to have what we refer to as stem cells, and this basically are cells which, of course, are going to be of course, involved in division and continuous nourishment or a production of new cells. Of course, I'm going to show that one in our next discussion. But this lower part, we are going to have another section referred to as the parietal cells. And this basically play the vital role of secretion of HCl, which is hydrochloric acid required in the stomach for digestion. And of course, we're going to also see that the intrinsic factors are also secreted at this specific point, and some essential hormones like the ghrelin, which we're going to see, of course, in another discussion. Now, in this case, it's also constituted this particular component of the chief cells, which, of course, secrete the lipase enzymes like lipase and the pepsinogen during the process of digestion. So basically, this is going to be a final details of the lining of the stomach. And as we have discussed the various aspects of this for the gastric pits and the glands, they are going to be playing a vital role in the final details of the concept of digestion. So catch us in our next video as we're going to look at an other aspect of the digestion system, which basically is going to constitute the process beyond the stomach. And that's going to play a vital role in assisting us understand the overall aspect of food through the digestive system in humans. So that is it for now, guys. Bye. God bless you. Catch us in our next video.